Hello, I'm Jeremy, and we are continuing with Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life. We are on, and FYI, this is Jordan Peterson with his wife and his son and daughter. We are on Rule 5. You can follow along with an audio version of the book, link in the description below. We are on section 0.6, so Rule 5.6. It's titled Minimum Necessary Force. And I like whenever they bring something a little bit more to it besides just his stories of his personal experience. And so I'm going to jump right well, do I want to? No, we'll keep it in order. So if you like what I'm doing, subscribe, hit the thumbs up at the minimum because it helps with the algorithm. There's going to come a point in time, hopefully not too long, in a couple of months or so, I don't know exactly, but a few months before the year's out, definitely, where I'm going to have a website and everybody's going to be able to contribute to what they think is good and what's not, but with evidence, because I'm tired of all the lies. And so there's a really good example with this. But first, let's get into. Yeah, let's just start at the beginning. So he's talking more about raising your children, and as the title suggests, the minimum necessary force. It's like, yeah, well, why would you want to be a horrible monster to your children? And if your parents were like that, your parents disciplined you in some way. Either a little bit or a whole lot, or maybe not at all. Or maybe they were just extremely dictative to you. Was it good or was it bad? What did you notice from other children and their families? What did you think about them and the way that they handle things? And to me, it seems that's just kind of obvious that you would want to do the minimum, because don't you have other things to do? Don't you have more engaging things to go out and pursue? Whether they be your own personal hobbies or activities with the family? Why would that be on anyone's radar at all whatsoever? And he talks about Occam's razor, which is the simplest explanation is usually the right one. And also to go along with that is to don't make things any more complicated than necessary at first. But you can make it more complicated and a little more worse as things go on. So if you have a kid that doesn't pick up his toys, at first it can be just telling them. And if that doesn't work, then it can move on to something a little bit more. Or maybe just pointing at them and saying, pick up your toys. If that doesn't work, then maybe raising your voice a little bit more. Or then maybe having to go on over and just stand right there by them and say, you are not going to do anything until you pick up these toys. Because you can physically block them. I mean, they're little. They can't do anything. Let them cry because they're mad. They're not crying because they're hurt. They're crying because they're mad. And then eventually they'll do it. I've done this plenty of time with kids. I mean, they're just completely powerless because they're like this big. And he talks about limiting the rules and using the least amount of force with necessary with kids to make it simpler. And this is something that I think that you should do with everyone all the time. Give people the benefit of the doubt that they're just unaware, that they just don't know. So just tell them. And if it really is a problem, then escalate it. And if you've got kids, then depending on their age, there comes a point, though, where they're old enough where they should be able to articulate their own punishment. And you can say, hey, if you don't do this, I'm telling you, what do you think your punishment should be? Get them to think. Get them to do the work. And if it's nothing and it's puny and pathetic, and you can tell them, yeah, it can be a puny little punishment. But just remember, you do it again, you have to think of a worse punishment. And you let them do it. Just create a worse and worse and worse and a worse punishment. I think that would be just a fantastic way to run your family. So now, anyways, I wanted to start up now because we're talking about something here about 6 minutes, 10 seconds into this audio here. It's page 138 in the book. It's that last paragraph, and I'm just going to read it. I'm not going to read the first couple sentences though. It's very easy to mouth cliches instead of doing what's right, such as there's no excuse for physical punishment or hitting children merely teaches them to hit. It's like those are cliches. It's just whenever I was growing up, everybody got busted. I had the belt used on me plenty of times, and I didn't go around beating up people and hitting people. I mean, if I got pushed enough, it's like, yes. Whenever I was little, I was probably the worst then, but definitely as I got older, by the time I was in high school, I wasn't going around hitting anybody. In junior high, I don't think I did any. In elementary school, yeah, maybe so then, a little bit. But that's how young though. That was decades ago. Let's start with the former claim. There's no excuse for physical punishment. Okay. First, we should note that widespread consensus around the idea that some forms of misbehavior, particularly those associated with theft and assault, are both wrong and should be subject to sanction. Okay. Second, we should note that almost all of these sanctions involve punishment in its many psychological and more directly physical forms. Here's oh man. Deprivation of liberty. I like politics and government, so this really stands out to me. Deprivation of liberty causes pain in a manner essentially similar to that of physical trauma. Well, do we know this for sure? And he answers this in just a moment. I'm going to underline this. The same can be said with the use of social isolation, and then in parentheses he has including timeout. So social isolation is essentially as similar to physical trauma. That one too. We know this neurobiologically. The same brain areas mediate response to all three. Deprivation of liberty, physical trauma, and social isolation. Really? One, two, and three. The same brain areas mediate responses to all three, and all are ameliorated by the same class of drugs. Opiates. Really? Really? Jail is clearly physical punishment. I want to underline that too. The same brain areas mediate response to all three, and all are ameliorated by the same class of drugs, opiates. Oh my goodness, really? Man, they know this. They know this. He's not a brain surgeon. This is what he's read from the literature. Jail is clearly physical punishment, particularly solitary confinement. Yes, I was a prison officer. I worked at a level 5 maximum security prison. There were people who were, well, not people, men. Level 5, they were in 23-hour lockdown. For 23 hours, they were in their cell. For 1 hour, they went out, and they went to a larger cell. And it was larger because it was big enough. It was almost the size of half a basketball court, and they could have a ball, and they could dribble, and there was a goal in there, and they could kind of play around in there. The reason why they were in there, really, though, was because they were so violent and so out of control that they would get into a fight or kill somebody. So an example would be somebody who was in a gang, if they saw a rival gang member, or they were extremely racist and bigoted, if they saw someone of another color or ethnic state, that they would kill And so, yeah. So that's why some of these were just there all the time. And they, months, years, whatever. And it was obviously punishment. I mean, obviously, that's what we do. Let me see. Even when nothing, so particularly solitary confinement, even when nothing violent happens. Third, we should note that some misbegotten actions must be brought to a halt, both effectively and immediately, not least so that something worse doesn't happen. Oh, I know exactly what he's talking about. What's the proper punishment for someone who will not stop poking a fork into an electrical socket? Yes! Into an electrical socket. Well, what's the appropriate response if they won't stop? Or who runs away laughing in a crowded supermarket parking lot? The answer is simple. Whatever will stop it fastest within reason, because the alternative could be fatal. Oh, so he's talking about a kid running through a crowded supermarket parking lot with cars. Yes. So what do? You just don't stay in there and just say, stop it. And if yelling at them, if jamming a piece of metal in an electrical socket, if telling them doesn't get them to stop, if yelling at them doesn't get it to stop, if pouncing and whatever doesn't get them to stop, if picking them up and moving them away and they just move back and they do it again, what do? Yes, there are a few extremely rare situations where you pound that kid's butt. Now, from my understanding, something that works extremely well is that it's half the child's age. So, I mean, a 1-year-old is like, no, you don't. What's half of one? Half. It's like you don't give them half a spanking, and it's because you don't spank a 1-year-old at all. 2-year-old, probably still not on that one, but 4? Yes, absolutely 4. And so how many swats should a 4-year-old get? 2. No more. However, if you're going to do it, you don't have to do it with all your force and might, but it does need to be enough that it gets the point across, because the whole reason for doing this is so that they stop. And so if you just come on up and you just go, I tell you what, little boys will just look at you like, what? I would have. I mean, I'm sure I probably did a few times, because I tell you what, Dad didn't get, the spanking stopped when he got tired. So, no, and I always thought that was trash. But yeah, now it's half. And it's because if you really do it right, then it should leave an impression, but not like just totally distraught and traumatized. And then also, to go along with it, is that you explain it to them. That will kill you, putting a metal thing in an outlet like that. And there's a few things, even whenever they get older, it's like, if I ever find out my child is doing drugs, World War III will erupt. No ifs, ands, ors, or buts about it. My kids will completely know ahead of time, before it even gets to that stage. Whenever they're very young, this will be made perfectly clear. And they will know the ramifications from Dad. It's because I didn't go out to have children just so I could watch them die, especially by doing stupid crap. So anyways, I was thinking, deprivation of liberty causes pain in a manner essentially similar to that of physical trauma. So why does the government do this? Why does the government restrict our liberty? So a good example of this is gun control. So many people have guns and absolutely nothing ever happens. So why, whenever there's a crazy person who does go out and does some kind of mass shooting, why punish everyone? And they do this all the time with so much. It's all the government does is that they just pass laws and policies and regulations that restrict us from doing whatever. And it's like, yes, there are some things, such as murder, rape, theft. It's like, yes, of course. But there are other things where it makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. And I was then led to the next question of, is this part of the reason why suicides have gone up because of COVID? Because the government is telling people that you can't leave whenever there's like over a 99% survivability over this? It's like, are they killing people of this because they're putting them in isolation? Solitary confinement? For nothing? Because they might get the sniffles? Because there's a 99.6 or 0.5 or 0.7, depending on who you're listening to, survivability, and you're going to punish everyone? And you're going to say, solitary confinement. I don't like the system that we have. It doesn't make sense anymore. It's extremely outdated. The way that it should be handled is that it should be by the people and all people through the internet with technology so that we can all mass communicate to each other, and you divide people out according to their skill levels. And so someone like Jordan Peterson, whenever it comes to psychology, he would be placed above the rest of us because he has his PhD and he has decades of clinical work. And the rest of us, such as myself, I have nothing to contribute to that because I don't have my PhD, I haven't done any kind of clinical work, there's nothing to prove me to be any better or more competent than anyone else. And so I would just be a person, a public, regular person. I would still say that that would hold more weight than that of a child, for sure. But if I don't have any kind of skills or expertise or training or anything of the sort, then why should my opinion mean more than anyone else's? And especially with someone like Jordan Peterson, who has all of this, where their opinion should be heard more than others. So Noam Chomsky is a great example of this. He got into politics, and you know what his big thing was? He was a linguist. So here's this fool right here, Noam Chomsky. A linguist. That is what he's been for the overwhelming majority of his life. A little bit of philosopher. Cognitive scientist is like, historian, no, he didn't do it. Political activist. That's what he's most known for. You know why? Because he wouldn't shut his damn mouth because he thought he had something to say, and it's like, no. All the rest of it I have no problems with. But the political activist, that I have a problem with. And so it's what politicians do. Trump, for example, is a great example of this. He's a businessman. He's not a politician. That doesn't mean that he didn't belong as president, because who's really qualified to being president? And we've had all kinds of people, from lawyers to generals, you name it. And I think, it's good that we kind of cycle through them, because there comes a time whenever the economy is down and it's like, yes, we need a business person. There comes a time whenever we're really militant and there's a lot of military campaigns going on. It's like, yes, well, maybe we need someone who's a little bit more of a general and more military minded. So, yeah, I think that's good. But I think today, we don't need this. We need people to be who they are, and then we need to listen to the best of each field and then bring it all together and stop people who don't belong. So I guess, I guess I won't be too hard on him being a political activist, but I don't like it today because we have all of this. Who is he to go out and do policies? I want policies not based off of people's feelings, but off of the facts. So whenever we have something that shows the scans of the neurobiology of the brain to show that there's correlations with all of this stuff, then I want something to be done about it. And so I just want everyone to think, are all these rules and regulations, are they really helping? Or are they making things worse for people? And then apply it also to your own life and your own job and everything that you can. Are these rules and regulations that you have in your home, are they really helping you, your family? Have you sat down to really think about it? Have you really explored it? Have you looked into it? Have you done your due diligence and researched it? Well, that's what we're doing here. And I like this next little bit that he talks about, that whenever kids are not disciplined, and in the rarer cases that sometimes physical punishment is needed because it has to be stopped now. It's like, this is horrible what this child is doing. I mean, really, truly horrible. It's like there are a few things, and whenever parents don't do this, and so even without the really bad things where you might have to get involved physically, there's still a lot of things. While there's just a few things physically, there's a lot of things where verbally, and you go and light physical, like if the kid's going to throw a fit, then you might have to go over there and pick them up and just hold them until they calm down, for example, or maybe go over there, pick them up and put them on a chair or a couch and be like, you've got timeout and you're going to stay here, and you just stand there and you block them until it's done. And they say, your timeout hasn't even started. You've got 15 minutes, but every time that you get up, it starts all over. And you stand there and you block them, and every time they get up, you put them back there and there in that chair. I've had to do that a few times. Like there was one little boy where his little mama just let him kind of do whatever. And I was really good friends with his dad, and it's big. And I know everyone and everyone of everyone whenever deals with all of them, but he was just used to just going and screaming and yelling and doing whatever he wanted. But they were in need of help, and so I was sitting for the kids for a stretch there. I wasn't having any of it. I told him he got in trouble, he got in timeout. He thought he was going to get up and run away. It's like, nuh-uh. I just got up in between him and wherever it was he thought he was going. Because I tell you what, it didn't matter where he went. There was nowhere that I couldn't go to follow him. And so I just got in his way, and I said, you can get back up there on that chair, and you can stay there until you've got yourself together. And we kind of went back and forth a little bit, and then he realized he wasn't getting anywhere, and I picked him up and put him down and said, you stay here until I say you can get up. And that'll happen whenever you are not acting up, whenever you've calmed down. I made it clear. And then whenever I noticed that he was kind of calm, I was like, are you calm now? You feeling better? Okay, well, go about your business then. And it was fine. It was fine. He acted up again, though, where he got in trouble in timeout. But he didn't fight me the second time. He knew he wasn't going anywhere. And so, anyways, he talks about how you do this with children because it doesn't matter if you do it or not. Society will punish them if they act up. And it makes things a lot worse for them. So I think that's something good to keep in mind whenever you're dealing with children, be it yours or someone else's. And also to look back at your own life. You know what? Do you act up at inappropriate times? Have you done this? And if so, there's a good chance you should be pointing your fingers at your parents. Because why not? You know, who likes that? I know, I'll bet you the moon and the stars and everything that there are some things that people could do that would annoy you to maddening, crazy, my pet peeve or whatever. You've got them, everybody does. And that if somebody was doing that, it would irk you too. And it's like, well, why? You know what? If you want to go do that stuff at home in your own time, that's fine. Knock yourself out. But whenever you're out there in public, I don't want to be troubled with somebody out there just yelling and screaming and running around like a little a-hole. No, it's like you can calm down and you can get the hell out of my way because I didn't come here for this stuff. So that would be something to take a look at. Are you doing these things? Because not only do these things piss off other people, but it's a waste of your time. You know, just running around and screaming and annoying people. It's like you have got to go and get your life figured out and figure out something better to do than that stupid drivel. Of all the things that you could be doing, that's the best you could think of? Loser. Well, I don't want to be a loser, so here I am. I hope you're joining me with this. So, He talks on a little bit later about how you should never say that you should never hit someone to your child. And it's because intensity matters. Or otherwise, there'd be no difference between a raindrop and an atom bomb. And it's like, yes, intensity absolutely matters. So, in our personal lives, I would say that all of this, with this section, minimum necessary force, is that whenever you're dealing with someone, no matter who they are, whenever you're dealing with someone and something is going on that you don't like, intensity matters, and you start off at the minimum necessary. Verbal conversation is a good place. Upping it and upping it and upping it and upping it. Depending on the situation, maybe it does need to get physical. Whenever I was working out at the prison, whenever I was in the Army, there are absolutely guys out there where that's all they understand. And every now and then, with those kinds of people, especially those guys, you've got to stand up and you've got to show that you're not going to take it. And the majority of the time, the overwhelming majority of the time, if you explain to them, and because I've definitely got the feeling throughout my life that there are plenty of guys out there who were treated like crap whenever they were at home. And so whenever they get treated a certain way, they think that they're being attacked because it goes back to mainly their father and what their life was like with that. But if you explain it to them, it's like, no, that's not it. Then it's like, oh, okay, so it's not against me, and you're actually a good person. It's like, well, yeah, and they'll see that they know it's been very rare throughout my life where I came across somebody who was just straight up a D-bag. I mean, just wouldn't listen to reason, just nothing, just too stupid or whatever the case may be, or too hurt or whatever. It's been pretty few and far in between. I'll take that back. In prison, whenever I was working in the prison, there was a larger amount there, but that also makes sense. Who would you expect to be in prison? So whenever I was dealing with those convicts and offenders, yeah, not all of them, but an unusual higher concentration. But I mean, not so unusual if you think about where it was at. So with the rest of this is a long one with a 5.6. I'm not going to go into the rest of it, but I found this one to be really engaging because I see this with politics. I see all of these politicians making these empty promises, and they don't suffer the consequences of any of this. Like with New York, where they put all of these sick elderly people into the retirement homes, and then all of these massive deaths occurred because there was no repercussions for this. They should be in prison for doing this. They killed those people. So the whole thing with that was everybody's going to get sick. That was never the case. It was never, well, we're going to do all this to prevent you from getting sick. No, it was, we need to keep it down so that the hospitals don't get overloaded. So that when you do get sick and you do need to go to the hospital, that we can go and put you in the hospital to get you care. It's like, as far as I know, no place has had the hospitals overloaded. If it's happened, and maybe it has, it's been pretty rare and few and far in between because they brought that ship into New York, that medical ship, they didn't use it. I remember seeing all of these triage set up hospitals with tents and all this stuff, and they were set up to handle all the COVID cases, and then nothing happened. They didn't get used at all. It was just nothing. Some people, I think they got in line, they got some shots or something like that, but all those beds that they had out there and all those tents and all that stuff, never used. The hospitals never got to that point. And as far as they can show, it's like being indoor or outdoor, that being outdoor was better because sunlight helps to destroy it. So being inside was worse. Or at least that's my understanding of it so far. So with the rest of it, read it yourself or listen to it. With the next section, with the next section of 5.7, a summary of principles. This is a lot about parent and child relationships, and if you've had issues with that, I would suggest looking into it. If you're a parent, yes, read this one. The only thing that I'm going to take out of this, with breaking bad habits, start with limited rules and punishment, but make it worse and more complex the more you mess up. And that's what he just finished talking about with limiting the rules and using the minimum force or the minimum necessary force to deal with the situation. Okay, well, let's do that with ourselves, because one of the things that we all have to deal with are the bad habits that we have, and it's because of the failure of the school system and our parents and everything else. The only one who's going to be able to do it is you. And so, yeah, set this stuff up. And this is what I'm going to lead into after the book are my habits as to... I don't know if I want to set things up necessarily as to breaking bad habits. I think putting more focus into the good habits. So, for example, if you watch too much TV, instead of focusing on working or watching less TV, instead it should be, what's a hobby to put in its place? Maybe to read. Maybe you want to write. Whatever venture that it is. Doing yard work, gardening. Some kind of craft or woodworking or whatever. Say that you're watching however much TV, but before you do that, say you have 2 hours of television watching and you want to get rid of it all. Well, the first 30 minutes has to be this, and then I reward myself for it. And then if you don't meet that, then what would the punishment be? And I would say something light at first. Whenever I was losing my weight, that's how it kind of was. It was a bunch of small little things, and I did a whole bunch of them, and it's kind of like, I've kind of come far. I've done a lot of things. So while they're all small, it's added up to a lot. So same thing with the test. You don't get 100 on a test because you answered one question. No, you answered 100 questions, and you got them all right. So same thing here. And yeah, so we'll move on to the last section. And so with the last section here, the good child and the responsible parent, it's still talking about the parent-child relationship. And again, if you're a parent, this is something that you should be aware of for sure, 100%. I would say, though, as an adult, what should you get out of this? That if you don't have friends, if you have a hard time getting along with people, part of that is going to be because of what your parents did. You're socially awkward. Do you have long-term friends that you've known for years and years and years? That I don't mean like, well, yeah, I know them, but I mean like you engage with them. And I'm not talking about somebody who's online hundreds of miles away. I mean, you get together with them. You do activities together. You share the same kind of beliefs in something, the same values, the same activities, whatever. If not, then it's your parents screwed up. It's time to fix it. I think I'm kind of in the middle of the road. I definitely like being alone. I can also definitely go out and I can speak before a group. I do not care. I have done it plenty of times in school, at places of work. I got up more than once and I yelled at all the offenders. I also got up and talked to all of the offenders. I got up and talked during briefings in the Army and there at prison. I've talked before social groups. Well, at church. I've gotten up and I've talked before groups at church. I've talked before my family, strangers, people I've known. I really don't care. I find that it's the most nerve-wracking whenever I don't know what I'm going to say. That, other than that, I don't care. And I don't expect to be perfect. And like, I'm going to mess up in what I'm going to say with something. Yeah, I don't care. So I'm human, and I've messed something up. Yeah, if you haven't figured that out, you're an idiot, and I don't want to talk to you. Because that is obvious. Oh, he messed up. It's like, duh! Are you kidding me? Hey, have you never listened or seen anything ever before in your life? The only time that anything is ever perfect whenever somebody is speaking is whenever you're watching a movie or a television show, because they can edit that stuff out. And all you have to do is look at the bloopers and see that they do it all the time. So anyways, social awkwardness. It shouldn't happen if you're an adult. And if it is, it's because there was a failure, and it's something that should be addressed, and it's because you can't do everything on your own. So, for example, if you were to go out and try to make a burger, how hard would that be if you had to actually do it all by scratch? If you had to raise the cow, grow the wheat, and feed it to the cow, and to make the wheat into flour, to bake it, to make the bread, and the tomatoes and the lettuce and the ketchup and all that stuff. If it was just you, how long would it take you? And apparently there is a guy who did it, and it took him like a year to be able to do it, because just growing the cow alone took forever, and then having to know how to butcher it and have a place and the tools to butcher it. Now imagine if you had to do that with everything. If you had to build your own house, and you had to make the nails in the wood and cut down the trees, if you had to make the hammer and the screwdriver and the pipes and the flooring and everything, you'd never be able to do it. It is literally impossible. And then finally, what about whenever it came to medicine? How long would it take you to discover the cure for cancer? How long would it take you to build a car from scratch? And you had to go mine the iron. You had to go make the rubber for the tires. You had to make the glass for the windshield. Or a computer. You would never be able to do it. So you need people. You cannot live by yourself. You don't. Because every time you go buy something, you've just cheated. Every single thing. Every house, every car, every computer, you cheated. So I think people who live by that mindset will, well, I don't need anyone. They're garbage. I'll take that back. I will say that they're naive. That maybe they are smart enough to understand it and nobody's ever explained it to them. I'll throw them a bone, because like I try to say is that whenever it is something associated with their profession, I expect them to know it, and if they don't, then I'm going to automatically call them a liar. But if it's not associated with their profession, then it's like, yeah, I'm going to give them some slack and say that they're ignorant. So like President Joe Biden talking about how he can just sign in some legislation doing some kind of gun control ban stuff, and also saying that you can't yell fire in a crowded theater. It's like, yes, you can yell that, and no, he can't write legislation with some kind of gun control. Those are both completely wrong. And because this is all government, this is all politics, and he's the president, he's just automatically, by default, an outright liar. Even if he honestly doesn't know, he's surrounded by people who are experts, and they absolutely do know. There are 100% people around him who do know. So, just nothing. So with these other people, yeah, I'll cut them some slack. I will still say that they are liars, but unintentional. So I hope that you've liked this and enjoyed this. We'll be moving on to Chapter 6 with the next part. I think it's part 13. Like, subscribe, thumbs up. We've got Patreon, subscribe, star. Thanks a lot for watching. We'll catch you next time. Bye.